As Rotary, we often ask ourselves, how do we grow, personally, professionally and organisationally? The answer is simple. To grow Rotary, we need more Rotary clubs. Let's use Anytown as an example. Anytown is a city of 100,000 people and a home to one proud Rotary club. But there are hundreds of other people of action, just like us, who are uniquely qualified to become Rotary members. They share the same drive and represent the values and fundamentals of a Rotary member. So why aren't they members? Well, the current club meets on Monday. There are leaders in Anytown who can't meet on a Monday. By excluding this segment, the potential members in Anytown has shrunk. Now consider, what if the meeting is at noon on Monday? There are people who can meet on Monday but can't meet at noon. So now we have a smaller audience for Rotary in Anytown. Of the remaining group, some aren't interested in a club with a sit-down lunch and speakers. They're passionate about service but aren't interested in a traditional club experience, and that is okay. The Rotary Club of Anytown isn't doing anything wrong. It just doesn't appeal to particular segments of the community. And if we are going to thrive for years to come, we must adapt and embrace change. In Anytown, we have an opportunity to expand, because potential members are everywhere. More than half of the eligible people are prospective Rotary members, waiting to make a bigger impact in their community. But what Rotary Club exists for them? If Anytown creates new clubs at new times and new places, the hidden potential for Rotary will be revealed. As people of action, we must broaden our reach and provide opportunities to all leaders in the community. Together, all of us can grow Rotary.
Україна похилилася. Чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася. А ми тую червону калину піднімемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей, гей, розвеселимо. Rot blüht auf der Wiese die Kalina, wer hat sie gebeugt? Einst in voller Pracht die Ukraine, grad so sorgenvoll. Rot will einmal wieder die Kalina
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to session 3, the final one of our Southwest and Southern Wales 4-district multi-district pets. The feedback was once again very positive from all the facilitators from session 2, and we feel it went really well. Hope you did. In that session, you discussed attracting new members and retaining new members. Two topics that are so important to us. And today we've got another topic that's going to be really important to us too. Before we hear from our first speaker, it falls to me to cover some housekeeping rules just once again to remind you about Zoom and some of the things we need to be doing. Are you home alone? If so, then leave your name and a contact number please in chat so that we can make a call if someone is observed being in distress. Your screen name. If you move your cursor over your screen image, you'll see 3 little dots appear at the top of the screen. Please use the option rename to make sure that your name and your club name is displayed. The main plenary sessions of this event, this particular session, will be recorded to enable those that were unable to attend to catch up, and maybe you want to watch it again, especially when you go back to see some of the speakers. Breakout sessions are not recorded, just for information there, and the recordings will be placed on a Rotary YouTube channel in a day or two's time when our techies have actually managed to edit them down and put them up there. There may be the opportunity, in fact there will be the opportunity this evening with our speaker to ask a few questions. So to do that, please use the Q&A icon in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to register your question, and one of our team will actually then issue those questions to the speaker on your behalf. Note the raised hand option will be ignored. We just don't have time to go around watching for all of those. We've one final breakout session this evening, and you will be transferred by the usual magical spell into your room with your facilitator, who will lead you through the discussion topic. Groups will be around 10 to 12 people once again, meaning that you're going to be all visible on the screen at the same time to take advantage of the situation as if you're all sitting around a table. So please take that chance to participate, share your thoughts and ideas, and share best practices as best you can. Allocation is random, so you'll be with different people tonight as you were the other day. There may be some visiting observers in the room. I remind them that they are there to listen and learn for future events and to remain as observers unless invited specifically to offer input by the facilitator. The facilitator will explain the hands up feature to enable you to gain attention in the meeting if you need to, and they'll also have a link back to the main room should they require help on a question or something. Being club president is enormously rewarding and enjoyable, but it doesn't come without potential challenges from within the club as well as from outside the club. And I now ask DGE Stuart Gilbert to introduce our next speaker, who's going to cover the topic of difficult conversations and moving the club forward. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. We've had some fantastic speakers, haven't we, this weekend? And tonight is no exception. Louise Carver, who I'm going to introduce to you just now, is a retired military officer. Now, you're going to say that's not possible when you see her, but they do retire them quite early these days. She's also a learning and a development practitioner, and she's the co-owner of a company called Resolution Space Limited, which is a consultancy which works with leaders and their teams who are trying to work through change, or they're dealing with some maybe dysfunctional behavior, or they just want to be better at working together. In essence, they help people to disagree well. Louise is also a qualified workplace mediator, and she has helped a number of people in conflict to reach satisfactory outcomes through a tried and tested mediation approach. Tonight, she would like to share some insights and some stories from her work and give us all some food for thought about having those difficult conversations and moving our clubs forward. Welcome, Louise. We're delighted to have you with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Stuart. I hope that wasn't a gasp of horror I just heard from someone there at the topic. No, thank you for that. And I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be hopping over the fence from observer to speaker. And to talk to you about something which I think is really important, certainly very important for me, and I think it's important for you as club presidents. To understand, a few things about managing your club when things are not easy. I've got 25 minutes max, so it's going to be a very high level canter through some thoughts that I've got. I want to give you some food for thought. I want to share with you some of my experiences, and then I'll hand over to Stuart, back to Stuart for the Q&A session. So here are 5 things that I really want to cover tonight very quickly. What is it that makes a conversation difficult? What does difficult mean? A little bit about the connections between motivation and behavior and conflict. As Stuart said, we're all about disagreeing well, the importance of disagreeing well, and what I've learned about that from mediation, how I try and work with clients to help them to disagree well. And some practical strategies for how you can plan and manage a difficult conversation, and then bring all that together and, so what? So how does that actually help to move your club forward? So it is, you're in a position, you're in a leadership role, taking over as club president, some of you, for, not the first time. And when some of you will have been or will still be in leadership roles elsewhere in your life. So I guess you could all say that, we might all agree that, wouldn't it be lovely if everybody in our teams thought the same way we did, behaved the same way, had the same sorts of approaches to things? And nobody disagreed with you and nobody challenged you over anything, and anything you said just got done. You didn't deal with any difficulty. Will no one rid me of this troublesome Rotarian? But there are places still in the world where that is absolutely the case, and the consequences of disagreeing or brooking some sort of argument are quite severe. And there are examples throughout history of companies which have folded, which have collapsed, and CEOs who've been imprisoned, and people who've died climbing Everest, for example, because they would not listen to constructive challenge. They would not allow people to offer them advice and to disagree with them. And something that's very close to my heart with my background, it took 15 years for the report into the Iraq inquiry to conclude, amongst other things, that had the climate been right for offering constructive dissent to the leadership at the time, we may never have gone into Iraq, and we may never have endured the loss of life that we did. So all of that, big stuff. And I think philosophically, we can perhaps agree that whilst it might be easy, if everyone agrees with us, it's not necessarily healthy. I'd like to share an illustration of how you start off with planning a difficult conversation. And it's very much about what difficult means to you. For me, it means something that's uncomfortable, that I would prefer not to do. But as a leader, you can't ignore it, sweep it under the carpet, bang people's heads together, or delegate it. So the first thing is about understanding what makes you tick. We're all differently wired. We're all human beings. We're all driven by different things. We all have different sources of motivation. And really, when you behave in a certain way, you know why you're behaving in that way. I know that what drives my behavior is a really deep-seated need to help other people grow and develop and thrive, to listen to them, to value them, to be concerned for their well-being. I want to be of help to people. I know all of that, but all that somebody else sees is what that looks like to them. Now, that can be really difficult for someone who's really strongly motivated by wanting to get stuff done, who wants to get jobs done on time, who finds it an irritant that we want to talk to people about what they think, or someone perhaps who wants to keep going back to the rule book, to what's in the Constitution, to going through the detail, to covering all the angles before we actually move forward with something. People don't behave badly because they're bad people, unless you've got clubs full of psychopaths or narcissists or psychotics or whatever, and I really genuinely hope that you don't. People behave badly, or we think they're behaving badly, because it doesn't accord with our own way of behaving, and perhaps doesn't align with our own behaviours. So I would suggest that is the first thing, is understanding what drives your behaviour. Understand that other people are very differently wired, and try to understand what might be behind that. Because failure to do that leads to conflict. And when I say conflict, I don't mean fisticuffs, I don't mean handbags on the rugby pitch. What I mean by conflict is the threat or the perceived threat of losing something of value. So if you are having a difficult conversation with someone, there's a very emotional, very psychological response to that. It might be losing something that's important to them, whether that's a lunchtime meeting or a title that they have. Especially if you're changing something, if you're coming in as a president and you want to change something, people are very uncomfortable with that. We don't, as humans, we don't resist change, by the way. We resist change being imposed on us. We change all the time, but we don't like it when people start to tell us what we should do. And really, if conflict is not managed and if it's not dealt with, it's not handled in the right way, it can become very damaging. It grows, people take sides, people start to gather evidence for why their position is the correct one. They become ever distant from each other. And actually that can be quite damaging for your club. In an organization, there might be a financial cost attached. There's always a human cost attached. But in the club, it might be something as simple as, you can't focus on what you're there to do. You can't focus on getting jobs done and on delivering those projects you want to, because people are just so flipping busy, arguing with each other, arguing with you, muttering behind your back, talking about what's not working for them. I was at my Rotary Club for lunch today, and at the table I was sitting at, there was a conversation going on about how annoyed they were that someone had decided something was going to happen and they hadn't been consulted. And all of that energy and all of that emotion was going into saying why they were fed up about that. So as presidents, it's really important that you understand the damaging effect that conflict can have. But the really big question for you is, how do you navigate between damaging conflict and constructive conflict? How do you make sure that it doesn't come at cost? The key principle of this in enabling people to disagree well is that the conflict does not become personal. So you haven't got people pointing fingers and being accusatory and being judgmental and confrontational. So the language that they're using is things like, I really hate it when you do that. It really annoys me when you say that. Or people are just, you go over the top when you do that. It's so personal, it's so judgmental. It's not allowing for us all to be differently wired. Constructive conflict is when people have those conversations in a non-threatening way. So when someone comes to you as a club president and says, have you thought about doing that this way? Or would it be an idea if we talked about that? This worked for me previously. There's a real difference in the language that's used. And constructive conflict is healthy. It might feel uncomfortable for you. You might feel that your position is being undermined, your authority is being undermined. But actually the benefits of inviting those different views are so, so powerful and so very real. So avoid it becoming personal, but also focus on your shared purpose. This is something that both Nikki and Tom mentioned in their addresses on Friday night and Saturday morning. Having that shared purpose, which means that you can disagree with each other because you're all heading in the same direction, whether that is creating hope in the world, service above self, painting the Scout hut, putting on lunches and teas for Ukrainian refugees who are living in your town. Whatever that purpose is, you're really clear about your purpose. And then you can invite people to disagree with you. And you can create the climate in your club for people to disagree with each other because it's not personal and because you share the same sense of purpose. When I'm conducting a mediation, I always check with the parties involved individually, and I keep checking with them that they want to resolve the conflict. Because if they don't, then it stops. And I have had an instance where they didn't want to resolve the conflict. One of the parties simply wanted an excuse or a platform, a safe space for having a real go at the other party. So in mediation, even with parties who are deeply entrenched in conflict, that shared purpose is to resolve the conflict. And the other thing that's really, really powerful in conflict is being listened to. And again, Nikki and Tom both mentioned this. There is something incredibly powerful about being heard in a non-judgmental, non-confrontational way. And quite often when I get the two parties together in a conflict and I finally start them talking to each other, quite often I will hear things like, I had no idea you felt like that. If only you'd said something. Can you tell me more about that? I didn't know that was happening for you. Just the power of listening to another person makes that person feel valued, feel that their views are important. And there is something about being able to talk about what's happened to get them to that place, being able to talk about why it's so difficult, why it's so uncomfortable. And if you can enable that to happen in your clubs, if you can role model that listening approach, that real active listening to understand, and to try and see what's going on for somebody else, what might be behind their behavior, with someone who's behaving aggressively because they're frightened of something, with someone who is incredibly emotional because there's something going on elsewhere in their lives. If you can listen to that and enable them to talk, that is an incredibly powerful skill and a much underrated one, in my view. So let's go on to the practicalities of planning and managing that difficult conversation. So we've talked about having that purpose, but in the conversation itself, you know, what do you want to get out of this conversation? Start with the end in mind. You know, what's important to you? Bearing in mind how you're motivated, you know, where you're likely to have some difficulty, where you're likely to feel uncomfortable. And I ask parties in a mediation, what is the best possible outcome for you? And if that were not possible, what's an acceptable outcome? And where are your non-negotiables? And when you're planning these conversations, it's really important for you to think about those sorts of things. You know, are you going to move from a lunch club to a breakfast club? And why is this person resisting that? And trying to have support for resisting that. Are you prepared to have a compromise of some sort? The best mediations, the best outcome from mediation and success is when both parties walk away feeling that they've achieved a reasonable amount. They haven't got everything they want, but it's an acceptable compromise. And that's a good outcome from a difficult conversation. Listening to understand, spoken about. Listen to understand rather than respond. And really listen. It's so tempting, isn't it, when someone's talking, particularly if they're being difficult, to go, right, I know what's happening, and to jump in. Let them talk. Note the things that you want to follow up on, but let them talk. And the power of silence is so important here as well. There is a school of thought which says you should stay silent for 7 seconds. Because when you're silent, people then start to talk more. They'll start to give more stuff up. They'll let all the anxiety, the anger, the frustration out. And it will be very, very powerful for them that you're just listening. And sometimes that's when they start talking about the important stuff, the stuff that really gets to the nub of what's going on for them. Look behind the behavior, as we've said, you know, listen to what they're saying and listen to the language they're using. Watch their body language. What are the sort of things that they're talking about? What's important to them? How are they speaking? Use non-confrontational neutral language. Don't make it accusatory. Talk about things that are concerning you. Talk about things that you'd like to know more about. Talk about how they make you feel or what they make you think when they behave in a certain way. Air concerns, not grievances. This is about moving forward with a particular purpose in mind, with a particular outcome in mind, not having a go at each other. And stay in the adult space. I like to call this channeling your inner adult. And what I mean by that is there can be a temptation when someone comes to you with an issue, with a problem, with a concern, to say, leave it with me, I'll sort it. And then they walk away and they've left you with their problem. You become their parent, you parent them. Or sometimes you can go to become a real sulky child. Well, if you want to do that, you get on with it then. You know, fine, that's your idea. It's really important to stay in the adult space and to have those constructive conversations as equals. And not to parent the people in your club. It's what my children call the mum phone call that I get sometimes as chair of governors in a secondary school, that I get sometimes from my governors or parents. And they phone up and they go, Mum, he's stolen my drinks bottle. Mum, she won't do the washing up. Mum, it's not my turn to walk the dog. And it's those kind of conversations where there might be a temptation in my head to go, okay, I'll fix it. Or to say, really, can you just leave me alone and sort it out? But it's the important thing, as I say, to channel your inner adult. So when you're planning your conversation, I mean, unless you're really, really fantastic at being able to respond immediately to everything, and I'm not, I'm a reflector, I need to process stuff. Here's some ideas about how you can manage that. There are two really, really good ideas, good ways of using questions in a difficult conversation. The first thing is it really starts to dig into people to what they're really thinking and what you really want to know about. And the second thing is it gives you a bit of thinking time. You can play for time. And it enables the conversation to move forward. It enables that dialogue. That first one is what I often use in my conversations. So thank you for bringing this to my attention. What do you want to happen next? What do you want to happen as a result of this conversation? What would you do if you're in my position? What have you tried so far? What's not worked? And make sure it stays adult to adult. So you're not going to solve their problem for them, and you're not going to walk away and go, well, get on with it. What you're trying to do collaboratively and collegiately is resolve the issue which led to the difficult conversation. So all of that is fine. So we've talked about the importance of understanding what makes you tick, the importance of understanding what might be going on for the other person, the importance of keeping the conflict constructive, of enabling challenge, of enable disagreeing well, so that you're role modeling as the president, you're role modeling how that happens, how those constructive conversations happen, and the value of inviting dissent, of inviting disagreement. And we've talked about what it looks like when it's constructive and the risks of becoming damaging. And about asking those great questions when you're planning and managing that difficult conversation. But so what? So how does all of this help you to move your club forward once you're doing all of that? Well, I'd like to share with you a model that I use with my clients. And it's a very basic format and a formula for enabling your club to be successful. And it starts from the bottom and you build up. This is a successful team. It's a successful team because they trust each other and they trust you as the president. That doesn't mean they trust you to turn up on time or to pay your subs or whatever it might be. It means that they trust that they can be vulnerable with you, that they can say to you, I'm really worried about this. I'm not happy about that. I don't know what to do about it. You've given me a job to do. I don't know how to do it. And you can trust that they will not ridicule you, that they will not somehow sanction you, that it will be done in a safe way, and you can trust them to look after those vulnerabilities that you're showing. And they can do that. And if you can do that, then they can disagree with you because they know that you're not going to punish them or ignore them for disagreeing with you. And because you're doing that, they can do it with each other. Because all the time they're focused on their shared sense of purpose. Is it creating hope in the world? Is it service above self? Is it painting the scout hut? Whatever it is, you can disagree about how to get there because you as presidents will really benefit from people who are differently wired, who have different ideas and different experiences. And they know they can articulate those to you and they know that you will listen. You might not necessarily take them forward. It's what a former colleague of mine used to call a liberal dictatorship, but you will listen and you will understand it will help you make better decisions. And because you're making decisions which have incorporated people's views, and because you have listened to those views in a constructive way, then they'll all help you with the accountability for moving the club forward. They will take ownership of the decisions that you have made, and you will have a successful club. And you will move forward with your shared sense of purpose, working collaboratively with that spirit of constructive dissent in a healthy way. So that was a very quick canter through, and I just want to leave you with some key takeaways from what we've discussed. I won't read those out, you can read those for yourselves, but those are some of the things that I've covered, which I believe are important to having difficult conversations and creating the climate of success so that you can move your club forward. And the final point I would make is that you are a very powerful support network. You're all in the same role. We do talk about the loneliness of command. You're all in the same role. You're all trying to do things. You're all trying to lead a successful club and move it forward. So talk to each other. If someone's doing something similar to you, ask how it's going. Be prepared to offer advice from your own experience. Maybe seek out people who are very different from you, who are doing very different things, and compare notes. But create those safe spaces for each other where you can support each other in moving your club forward. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that's been helpful, but I'm now happy to hand over to Stuart for the Q&A session.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. Some great practical advice there for all of these ladies and gentlemen who are going to become presidents very soon. So we do have some questions to tee up for you. If you want to add another question, please, as Dennis explained, go to the Q&A box on your panel and just type in your question there so I can forward it to Louise. So the first question, which is a really practical one, Louise, how can you deal with someone who threatens to leave the club if you don't do what they want?
Okay, well, it's listening to them and understanding what their, their difficulty is. I mean, I have to say that, in a mediation, in a conflict situation, when I'm mediating a workplace conflict, one of the successful outcomes might be that one of the parties leaves the organization. So if that's the best way forward, then there is nothing wrong with someone leaving. But I think that would be a shame. And as a president, you may need to make that decision between, if this club doesn't work for this person, but we can keep them for Rotary by listening to them and accepting their challenge, then is that a good outcome? But if someone is threatening to leave, again, it's about understanding why that causes you discomfort and what is lying behind the behavior. Why is that person so keen to leave the club? What is it that's actually going on? Ask those great questions. Ask them to give you some examples. It's very difficult when you're in that role and someone issues a threat like that, is to see it as a challenge to your authority or undermining your authority. And the important thing is not to see it like that. The important thing is to try and get behind what's really going on, what's actually led up to that, and ask those questions. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
I think that's a good answer. Yes, thank you. Because these are the kind of things that actually do happen in some clubs. Not your clubs, of course. Your clubs are all perfect. But in some clubs, these kind of things do happen. So here's another question for you, please. Any suggestions then on how you can work out why someone is being difficult? What a great question.
Well, yeah, that is a great question. And what I would say is, again, being very aware of, your own, your own sources of motivation, what drives your behavior, but also what you find difficult. It took me a long time to learn that myself, that actually I do get really I get quite resistant to people pushing me to do something and doing it in quite a hostile way and saying, come on, because I don't like that, and asking me to disregard what other people think. But I also know that can manifest itself in some very difficult behavior. I know, because I've learned the hard way, that if someone crosses those red lines for me, I'm very amenable, I'm very easygoing until someone says something which really conflicts with my values. And then I have a tendency to go bang, which is quite shocking for people who work with me and think I'm just a very lovely, easygoing person. So it's being aware, it's being aware. And so when you look at someone else and they're being really aggressive and they're being really hostile, manage that response in yourself. This person is not behaving like this because they're fundamentally evil. They're behaving like this because something that they value is under threat. So what is that? And, sometimes a behavior doesn't manifest itself in aggression or hostility. It manifests itself in just disinterest. They disengage. So it's how can you bring them back in? How can you really understand what's going on for them? And you can do that by picking up on the visual clues they give you, on the verbal clues. What language are they using? How are they behaving when they're talking to you? How can you find out what's really going on for them and understand what's important to them? And then get the best out of them and out of the conversation.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Now, here's a question from someone who was listening carefully to what you were saying, because you mentioned that you are a reflector. You like to take time. So how do you explain the difference between taking time to reflect or to think and being accused of procrastination?
Oh, that's a great one. I like that. Well, if I were to do that, if I were to say, okay, can you just leave that one with me? And it's someone who really wants a quick answer. It's again, having that shared sense of purpose. I would like to have some time to reflect on this, but perhaps you can share with me some of the things that you would like to see happen. So bring them in a way that you think is actually playing to their strengths. If they really want action, or if they really feel that something isn't happening that absolutely should be happening, and they're starting to use that, the worst phrase in the English language, what you should do is. it's enabling, it's you know, talking to myself and saying, I absolutely have to take the time to reflect on this. Sometimes you have to say, forgive me, I just need a couple of minutes to process this. Okay. One of the reasons for asking those sort of questions that I suggested is it does give you a bit of thinking time. There's nothing worse than someone asks you a question and you don't say anything. I'm also well aware that because I do reflect and I do take time to process things, I don't necessarily share I don't show my workings out. And if someone has a great need for information, to have a running commentary of all my thought processes, and I'm not giving them that, then yes, they might think I'm procrastinating or just not acting what they've said. And I need to be well aware of that and try and play to the other person's strengths to get to that outcome that we both need.
Thank you. So here's a question. I'm not deliberately not naming the questioners because I think some of these things are, they're quite personal. But who would you say is the president's most trusted confidant? Who can the president trust in his club or her club?
In the club, as opposed to
outside. Or outside of the club, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important that you have someone with whom you can have those constructive conversations. So it's about trust. So whom do you trust? Who is going to let you talk? Who's going to listen to you? And who is going to enable you to say, I'm not sure about this, I'm a bit bothered about that, or I don't know how to do this. So it's about having a critical friend. A critical friend is someone who is close enough to you to understand what makes you tick and understand what's likely to send you into a bad place, but not so close that they can't step back and say, actually, it would be better if you did this, or I think if you do that, the following might happen. So it's about that. Now, I don't know who that might be. It might be the president-elect. It might be the club secretary. It might be none of those. It might not be somebody who has a particular role in the club. But I would think in your club, it is so important that you have someone who can be that critical friend and adopt that role. And I think just going back to one of my previous premises, I'm not going to answer that question with a specific definitive answer, because I think that's something that presidents need to find out for themselves in their own clubs.
Thank you for that. So one final question. You spoke a little earlier about allowing dissent, and is there a risk maybe that allowing too much dissent might undermine the president's position of authority, Louise?
Yeah, and again, a really good question. This is something, so as chair of governors in a big school, sometimes I go to meetings and I'm not the person doing the talking, and I'm not the person making the suggestions. That might be one of my committee chairs. And there is a risk that, if you're not the person who's appearing to be in charge, therefore that means that you don't have the authority. And it was, again, something that, in the military, I learned the hard way, that I don't need to be a visibly autocratic, assertive leader to be in charge, to have the authority of leadership. And by the way, in a military setting, if you have to use the rank on your shoulder, then you have basically lost the argument. It is about how you use your authentic self to lead people. And you lead in a way which is authentic for you. So I lead in a collaborative way. I let people have the ideas and talk, but ultimately, because I'm credible, because I'm credible in a leadership role, because I know what I'm talking about, and because I've taken the trouble to listen to other people, ultimately it's my decision. And it's what I referred to a short while ago. It's a liberal dictatorship. Please disagree with me, offer me your views, challenge me, tell me why it's not going to work. We'll have the conversation. I'll take some of your views forward. I won't take others forward, but I'll tell you why not. But when I leave this room, or when I step out there and I'm the club president, my decision is based on all the things that we've discussed, but it is my decision and I'm accountable for it. And that is where I have my authority vested in me. And if people want to undermine that, then that's why we come back to the difficult conversations. But it's being aware of what makes you authentic, of what makes you credible as a leader.
Louise, thank you so much. And thank you to those of you that have asked questions this evening. It's been very helpful. I'm going to hand over now to the lovely Mary Adams, who is going to say thank you a little bit more formally. Mary, thank you.
Wow, Louise, I seriously hope the president-elects don't have to have any difficult conversations. But we are so lucky to have you in our cluster. Firstly, as a Rotarian, and then secondly, as an experienced learning and development practitioner, facilitator, presenter, and mediator with over 30 years experience working in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. Having difficult situations within your club when you are club president is something you will probably never encounter. And we as DGEs felt that it was a subject we needed to cover as part of your training in case you do. We are fortunate to be able to count on someone of Louise's experience to discuss these awkward moments. I'm sure that Louise, together with the rest of the team, hope you have a successful year free of this conflict. But if you do, please think back to the advice given at these sessions and seek help and advice. You are never on your own in Rotary. There is always a go-to person. Thank you, Louise, from us all for being here this evening and sharing with us your valuable knowledge and experience, and I'm sure some of us would like you on speed dial.
Very happy. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much.
I would like now to introduce the final breakout session, Running Your Club. You will have 50 minutes to discuss this. See you later.
Well, President-elects, I do hope you feel fully prepared to run your club. Hopefully not having to manage difficult conversations, but able to attract new members. Facilitators, I am going to ask three of you if you can give a couple of points, key points from your group this evening. So can we start, please, with Ken Robertson? Some key points.
Thank you, thanks. A lot of very, very good points came out and great ideas. So I'm going to share a couple of them, but you'll have to work out just who exactly gave them. Jeff is going to work with or make contact with the local junior chamber and get involved. He sees that as a way of getting into business and getting younger members involved that want to do projects and link up with them. And there's a lot of junior chambers, so I thought that was a particularly great idea. And then Paul is going to produce, and has started work on this already, 1,000 bookmarks, which brings in £1,000 by advertising various companies. They then give the bookmarks back to these companies and they distribute them. That brings in about £800 of revenue to the club and gets the name broadcast across the community through different businesses. So I thought these were two great ideas amongst many that were put forward for ways that they want to improve the club's operations in the year ahead. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ken. Some really practical ideas there. That's great. Right, the next one, Robin Brown. Have you got a couple of key points, please?
Muted, Robin.
Robin, you're on mute, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Right, sorry about that.
That's
there was
fine.
a common thread running right through that last session that I think was pretty important to pick up on. And it intermingled with all the topics that we're talking about, and that was actually to do with the decision-making of the club. Wow. And it was all sorts of different ways that how they were going to increase the focus. For example, with business meetings that were attached onto the end of a meal that really had a sense of purpose about them, and like people felt that they were being involved and so on and so forth. And really getting down to the nitty-gritty with things, looking at why they were actually doing something, like undertaking community needs assessments, this sort of stuff, but all seem to be heading towards a better way at taking decisions for the clubs, to do with its management, to do with its projects, to do with its financing.
Fantastic. That was a accumulation of everything from the last three sessions. Really, it's brilliant. And finally, Kevin Needham, please.
Good evening, everybody. Some amazing things that came out of my group, but a couple was one suggested that, all of them were suggesting that one of the biggest problems we're having is getting people to take on these roles. And the ones that are doing them have been doing them for many years. They're wonderful. So shadowing, getting somebody to at least shadow is going to be really critical to move things forwards. The other thing that came out of this was that one club suggested that they've got a president, but they're going to have 6 vice presidents, each taking 2 months to try out the roles and just see, then at least have some continuity moving forward. One of them will then take on the role. So they're just going to try it out.
That's a great idea. I have heard of that before. So I'll be really interested to find out. And is that that's the main point from your...
That was a couple of them, yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Others built on exactly what was being said earlier.
But isn't it great that they've shared all these ideas and they're really thinking about the next few months, because it's not long. So well done, everybody. And a big thank you to the facilitators. It's been great. President-elects in District 1100. I'm certainly looking forward to working with you in my Rotary year. And I welcome an invitation to visiting your club. I think I've already got 4 clubs that have asked me to visit. So that is pretty good going. I'm really excited about that. So thank you very much. And thank you for taking part over the last 3 sessions, really. Now I want to pass over to my colleague, Mary Adams, and she's just going to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Anne. We as District Governor-elects of the 4 districts sincerely hope you've been inspired by our wonderful speakers this weekend. I'm sure you'll agree they've helped to increase your knowledge and awareness to prepare you for your presidential year. This multi-district PETS is a unique opportunity for you to meet presidents-elects in the cluster who are in the same position as you. I hope to meet with the president-elects in District 1150 over the next few weeks to get your feedback. And we sincerely hope that you've had a positive experience over this weekend. We wish you all good luck and best wishes from us all. And over now to Stuart.
Thanks, Mary. What can I say? It's been a great weekend, hasn't it? And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. I really want to thank everyone that's been working behind the scenes, the people you haven't even seen this weekend that have just made it all work so brilliantly, and to our speakers and facilitators. I want you to have fun during your year. Enjoy every minute, because believe me, it will be over before you know it. All right. And I'll see you guys in District 1200 very soon. Here's David.
Hey.
Our best looking DGE of the 4.
He's remembered to say it. What can I say, following my 3 colleagues? But we're very lucky because we 4 get on extremely well together. And I think seeing this weekend, starting on Friday evening with the speakers we had with Gordon, Nikki Scott, who was outstanding. Yeah. There's so many that we could choose, but it's been a wonderful experience to share this between the 4 of us, but with all of you as well, over 100 people attending every night. So it's been a wonderful experience. And it's one we should build on. You know, working together, coming together and being stronger together is very important. We have got a great future ahead of us. There's a few challenges, but we're up to it. But with your help in the clubs we're representing, together we can do that. But remember what I say, and I do firmly believe that we are stronger together. There's a way forward, but we've got to change. And it's how we change and what we change into is very important. So take that challenge on board and let's go forward together. Thank you all very, very much for your time, for sharing this. And I echo what Stuart has said by thanking those in the background that have enabled this to happen. And, you know, all to the district training officers, to those doing the IT this evening. You've done a terrific job. Keep it up, and long may it continue, because we'll be in another place, but watching your every move. Thank you. And over now to Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, DGEs. What a wonderful 3 sessions we've had. We promised you that you'd hear and see speakers that you probably wouldn't have had the chance to do so normally, and I hope we fulfilled that for you. Thank you, Presidents-elect, for your participation and your time. The numbers have been up, and we've been privileged to have your company here over those 3 sessions. But as has already been said, we must acknowledge and thank the team behind the event. Managing the Zoom rooms is not an easy task when you've got a dozen or so breakout rooms going on. Organising the speakers, trying to get Tom Gump to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and things like that. You know, these are some of the challenges that they've risen to. Recruiting facilitators. Most of the facilitators that you've had with you this weekend are out of your districts. The technical team are out of your districts, and they've spent the time to make it work for your districts, and that's brilliant news. So people organising facilitators, coordinating registration, for example, is another challenge. That's a big one. So big thanks to Wendy Ford and Phil Dyer, Chris Davies, Bob Maskell, and the DG continuity team. So not just the DGEs, but the continuity teams from previous year and the following year, all been involved. And of course, all the district training officers and local LDT teams of each district. So President-elect training is here to concentrate the mind on the year ahead. And I hope we've been able to do that for you. Whether it's your first time or your 4th time through the chair, times change, as do the needs and expectations of our members. And I hope that this event has enabled you to share your thoughts and ideas and to develop a new and refreshed approach to the year for your club. Remember, President-elect training is about the club, about running the club. You've got district assembly to come yet. That's about delivering service and everything else that we've got. So we wish you all a successful, rewarding and enjoyable year as club president in 23-24. Thanks very much, everyone, and good night.